The human queen's declaration echoed through the crystalline throne room as Admiral Kane stood frozen at attention. "I claim this prisoner as my consort under the ancient law of conquest." The Zephyrian warlord chained before them lifted his head slowly, silver eyes meeting hers with something that wasn't quite surprise. Blood still marked his pale skin from the battle that had ended his fleet's advance on Earth's outer colonies. His people had surrendered only when he fell, their loyalty absolute even in defeat. "Your Majesty," Kane's voice carried the slightest tremor, "the prisoner is scheduled for interrogation. The High Council expects—" "The High Council will receive my decision." Queen Victoria's hand rested on her ceremonial sword. "The law is clear. As the victor in personal combat, I may claim any spoil of war." The alien's mouth curved in what might have been amusement. When he spoke, his accent carried the musical quality of his species. "Jews' human customs are fascinating. Do you always collect dangerous creatures? Only the ones worth keeping." Her reply drew sharp intakes of breath from the assembled court officials. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, his diplomatic training barely containing his alarm. "Majesty, this decision requires careful consideration. The Zephyrian Empire will honor the same ancient laws they've used to bind conquered worlds for centuries." Victoria moved closer to the prisoner, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Tell me, Warlord Axel, do your people respect strength?" His chains clinked as he straightened. "We respect those who earn it. Then you understand my position." She gestured to the guards. "Remove his bonds." The throne room erupted in whispered protests, but Victoria's raised hand brought immediate silence. Kane's training warred with his instincts as he watched the Zephyrian flex his freed wrists. "Dastius," General Morrison muttered from his position near the throne. "He could kill you with one move." Axel tilted his head, studying the queen with predatory interest. "I could, but that would be poor repayment for unexpected mercy. Not mercy, strategy." Victoria's smile was sharp as any blade. "Your empire responds to displays of power. What message does it send when their greatest warlord becomes the consort of a human queen?" The alien's silver eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. "You would use me as a symbol. I would use this marriage to prevent a war that would consume billions of lives on both sides." Her voice carried throughout the chamber. "Unless you find the prospect of peace distasteful." Kane watched the interplay between them, recognizing the chess match unfolding. The queen had turned certain execution into potential alliance with a single bold move. "My fleet commanders will not accept this easily," Axel warned. "Then, convince them. Show them that strength sometimes means choosing survival over vengeance." Victoria stepped back, her posture regal despite the unprecedented situation. "The ceremony will be tomorrow. You have until then to decide if you're truly the leader your people believe you to be." The warlord's laugh was low and rich. "You challenge me even in offering sanctuary. Very well, human queen. I accept your claim." The court officials exchanged horrified glances as Victoria nodded to Kane. "Escort our guest to the diplomatic quarters." "Full honors, Admiral." Kane saluted crisply, his mind already cataloging the security requirements. "Yes, Your Majesty." As the procession moved toward the throne room's exit, Ambassador Chen fell into step beside the Queen. "The ramifications of this decision will ripple across every system, Majesty." "That's the point." Victoria's voice was quiet but firm. "The Zephyrian Empire has conquered 17 worlds in the past decade. Traditional diplomacy has failed. Perhaps it's time for unconventional solutions." Axel glanced back at her as Kane's guards formed an escort around him. "Your reputation for tactical brilliance appears well earned. You haven't seen anything yet." The Queen's smile was enigmatic. "Rest well, Warlord. Tomorrow you become part of something larger than either of our worlds dreamed possible." Kane felt the weight of history settling around them as they walked through corridors lined with portraits of previous monarchs. None of them had ever faced a decision quite like this one. "Admiral," Axel spoke quietly as they approached the guest quarters, "your queen is either the most brilliant strategist I've encountered or completely insane." Kane's response was measured. "In my experience with Her Majesty, those aren't mutually exclusive possibilities." The aliens' laughter followed them down the hall as the palace began preparations for the most controversial wedding in galactic history. The diplomatic quarters buzzed with activity as news of the Queen's declaration spread beyond the palace walls. Kane stood at his command post, monitoring communications from across the human territories and beyond. The reactions ranged from outrage to fascination, but the strategic implications were becoming clear. "Sir," Lieutenant Brooks approached with a secure tablet, "we're receiving transmission requests from every major and minor world in the known systems. The Galactic Council has called for emergency session." Kane nodded grimly. Victoria's gamble was forcing the entire political landscape to shift overnight. Through the reinforced windows, he could see media vessels gathering in the restricted airspace, their crews desperate for any glimpse of the proceedings. In the royal chambers, Victoria stood before her advisors as they presented option after option for backing down gracefully. Her wedding dress hung nearby, a symbol of commitment that none of them truly understood yet. "The Zephyrian battle cruisers are holding position at the system's edge," reported Defense Minister Walsh. "Our analysts believe they're waiting for some signal from their leader. They'll have it." Victoria's certainty silenced the room. "This marriage will give Axel the legitimacy to negotiate a lasting peace treaty. His people follow strength, and by claiming him, I've demonstrated that humanity possesses it." Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, the royal physician, cleared her throat nervously. "Majesty, the biological compatibility assessments will be handled after the ceremony. We're not discussing consummation tonight, Doctor. We're discussing survival." Victoria's tone brooked no argument. In the guest quarters, Axel stood at the window watching the same gathering storm of media and military vessels. The formal attire provided by the palace fit his tall frame perfectly, though the human styles felt foreign against his skin. Kane entered after announcing himself, carrying a secure communication device. "Your fleet commanders are requesting contact, sir." "Of course they are." Axel accepted the device. "They're wondering if their warlord has been broken by human captivity." The holographic image that appeared showed 3 imposing figures in Zephyrian battle armor. Their leader, Admiral Vex, spoke in their native tongue before switching to Galactic Standard. "Warlord, we await your orders. My orders are simple. Maintain current position and prepare for extended negotiations." Axel's voice carried the authority that had commanded fleets across star systems. "The humans have made an interesting proposal. They seek to humble you with this marriage charade," Vex's second snarled. "Give us the word and you'll do nothing without my explicit command." Axel's interruption was sharp as winter wind. "The Queen's strategy is more sophisticated than you realize. Study it. Learn from it. We may have found adversaries worthy of our respect." Kane watched the exchange with professional interest. The alien's control over his subordinates was absolute, even in these unprecedented circumstances. After the transmission ended, Axel turned to Kane. "Your queen surrounds herself with capable people. Admiral, I begin to understand why the Zephyrian advance stalled at your borders. Her Majesty has that effect on those who serve her." Kane's response was diplomatically neutral, and on those who oppose her, apparently. Axel moved to the formal wardrobe. "Tell me, Admiral, in your professional opinion, what are the odds this alliance will actually prevent war?" Kane considered the question seriously. "Higher than any alternative we've calculated, sir." Meanwhile, in secure chambers throughout the palace complex, emergency meetings continued through the night. The implications of a human Zephyrian union touched every aspect of interstellar relations. Ambassador Chen worked frantically with his diplomatic corps, drafting preliminary treaty frameworks that could be presented to both governments. The wedding itself would need to serve as more than ceremony. It would be the foundation for an entirely new political reality. The economic ramifications alone could destabilize 3 sectors, his aide reported. Trade routes, resource allocations, territorial boundaries, everything will need renegotiation. "One crisis at a time," Chen muttered, reviewing the legal precedents for royal marriages between species. "First, we need both parties to survive this ceremony." In her private study, Victoria reviewed intelligence reports on Zephyrian culture and customs. The decision had been made in the heat of the moment, but its execution would require careful attention to details that could mean the difference between alliance and renewed conflict. Her personal secretary, Maria Santos, entered with updates from the kitchen staff. The chefs are requesting guidance on the reception menu, Majesty. They're unsure about Zephyrian dietary requirements. Simple foods, nothing that could be interpreted as either dominant or submissive presentation. Victoria's understanding of alien psychology was proving crucial. This event must appear as a meeting of equals. As dawn approached, the final preparations accelerated. Security details coordinated with diplomatic protocols while media teams established their approved positions. The ceremony would be broadcast across human space and simultaneously transmitted to the Zephyrian fleet. Kane made his final rounds, checking every detail that could affect the day's outcome. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, not just for the Queen's physical safety, but for the fate of worlds that would be determined by the next few hours. The great cathedral filled with representatives from dozens of worlds as Victoria made her entrance. The traditional wedding march carried different weight when played for an audience that included alien diplomats and military commanders from across the galaxy. Axel waited at the altar in formal human attire modified to accommodate his physiology. His silver eyes tracked Victoria's approach with the same intensity he'd once reserved for analyzing enemy fleet formations. The ceremony itself would be remembered across the systems, but its true significance lay in the quiet moment when two former enemies chose cooperation over destruction. The cathedral's ancient stones had witnessed centuries of royal ceremonies, but nothing approaching the historical magnitude of Victoria and Axel's union. Representatives from 47 worlds filled the sacred space, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex environmental management challenge that Kane's security teams had spent days perfecting. Archbishop Matthews approached the altar with visible nervousness, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the ceremonial text. The traditional human marriage service would require significant modifications to acknowledge the unprecedented nature of this union. Victoria moved down the aisle with measured steps, her dress a masterpiece of diplomatic symbolism. Human traditions blended seamlessly with subtle nods to Zephyrian aesthetics, silver threading that caught the light like starfield navigation charts, gem placements that echoed the configuration of his home system's major worlds. Axel's expression remained composed as she approached, but Kane noticed the slight widening of his eyes as he absorbed the ceremonial details. The Queen had studied his culture with the same thoroughness she applied to military strategy. "Dearly beloved," Archbishop Matthews began, his voice carrying throughout the cathedral via translation matrices, "we gather today to witness not merely a union between two individuals, but the forging of a new path between civilizations." The words echoed in 17 different languages simultaneously as diplomatic protocols engaged. In the reserved sections, alien ambassadors leaned forward with intense interest, recognizing that this ceremony would reshape interstellar law. Victoria's vows departed dramatically from traditional text. "I take you not as conquest, but as partner. Not as subject, but as equal. Together we will build something stronger than either of our peoples could achieve alone." Axel's response revealed the careful consideration he'd given to this moment. "I bind myself to your cause and your people, as you have bound yourself to mine. Let our union stand as proof that strength serves best when it protects rather than destroys." Kane monitored the communication channels as the vows were transmitted across the galaxy. Response data flooded in from human colonies and Zephyrian territories alike. Surprise, concern, but also growing recognition of the ceremony's strategic brilliance. When the rings were exchanged, both bore inscriptions in ancient scripts from both cultures. Victoria's ring carried a Zephyrian phrase meaning honorable adversary, while Axel's bore the human motto, strength through unity. The Archbishop's final pronouncement carried weight that extended far beyond the cathedral walls. "By the power vested in me by the crown and recognized under interstellar law, I now pronounce you joined in marriage, partners in peace, and co-architects of a new age." The moment their lips met in the ceremonial kiss, Kane felt the tension in the cathedral shift dramatically. What had begun as wary observation transformed into something approaching optimism. "Your Majesties," Ambassador Chen stepped forward as the ceremony concluded, "the Galactic Council stands ready to recognize this union and begin formal treaty negotiations. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning. Let history record that when faced with the choice between war and wisdom, we chose the harder path of understanding." Axel's addition carried equal weight. My fleet commanders will witness the strength of human resolve and the wisdom of their leader. This alliance will be built on mutual respect, defended by shared purpose. The reception that followed required unprecedented diplomatic choreography. Human and Zephyrian customs blended in ways that would influence social protocols across the galaxy for generations to come. Kane watched from his monitoring station as the newlyweds moved through their duties with remarkable synchronization. Victoria's strategic mind and Axel's commanding presence created a formidable partnership even in these first hours of their marriage. Admiral, Lieutenant Brooks approached with the latest fleet positions. The Zephyrian battle group is moving to ceremonial formation. They're saluting. Through the observation windows, the massive alien vessels had arranged themselves in a configuration that unmistakably honored the Union. Kane allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he realized Victoria's gamble was paying dividends beyond their most optimistic projections. The evening's formal dinner brought together species that had been at war mere days before. Conversations in multiple languages filled the great hall as former enemies began the delicate process of becoming allies. Victoria and Axel presided over the gathering with natural authority, their every gesture closely observed by those who would carry news of this day back to their respective worlds. The success of future negotiations would depend largely on the impression they created tonight. As the formal ceremonies wound down, Kane received updates on the broader galactic response. Stock markets had stabilized after initial volatility. Trade negotiations were being proposed along previously hostile borders, and military commanders on both sides were quietly discussing cooperation protocols. The wedding night itself would be largely ceremonial. Both parties understood that the consummation of their political union mattered more than any personal intimacy. They retired to separate chambers within the royal suite, their marriage serving its intended purpose without requiring romantic attachment. Kane's final security sweep confirmed what he'd hoped to see. The palace remained secure. Communications were flowing smoothly between former enemy territories, and the Queen's boldest political gamble appeared to be transforming into lasting diplomatic success. In her private chambers, Victoria finally allowed herself to consider the personal implications of her choice. She had married for strategic reasons, but Axel's intelligence and dignity suggested that their partnership might evolve into something more than mere political convenience. Morning brought the first official state meetings between human and Zephyrian representatives. The conference room's long table, which had hosted generations of diplomatic negotiations, now accommodated beings whose species had been locked in conflict until yesterday's revolutionary ceremony. Victoria entered with Axel at her side, their coordinated appearance immediately establishing the new political reality. Kane noted how naturally they moved together, their different strengths complementing rather than competing with each other. Gentlemen, Victoria addressed the mixed assembly, we gather as representatives of peoples who share this galaxy. Our discussions today will determine whether future generations remember us as the architects of peace or the architects of mutual destruction. General Morrison spread tactical displays across the conference surface. Zephyrian fleet positions have shifted to non-aggressive configurations throughout the disputed systems. Our own forces are responding with similar de-escalation protocols. Admiral Vex, present via holographic projection from the flagship, spoke with grudging respect. The warlord's marriage has created opportunities for re-evaluation of our strategic objectives. Axel's response demonstrated his understanding of both military and diplomatic necessities. My people respect strength, but they also understand that the greatest strength lies in choosing one's battles wisely. This alliance offers advantages that conquest never could. Ambassador Chen presented preliminary frameworks for territorial agreements, trade protocols, and joint security arrangements. The complexity was staggering, but the foundation laid by the royal marriage provided a structure for negotiations that would have been impossible days earlier. Resource-sharing arrangements could benefit both empires significantly, reported Economics Minister James Patterson. Zephyrian mining technology combined with human manufacturing capabilities would create unprecedented efficiency. Victoria studied the proposals with the same intensity she'd once reserved for military intelligence. We're not just preventing a war, we're building something entirely new. Kane monitored the security implications as agreements took shape. Joint patrol arrangements would require careful coordination between forces that had been shooting at each other less than a week ago. "The transition won't be simple," he reported during a brief recess. "Both militaries are struggling with the psychological adjustment from enemy to ally. Give them time, Axel. Warriors adapt quickly when their leaders provide clear direction." The afternoon sessions focused on cultural exchange programs and scientific cooperation initiatives. Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief science advisor, presented research proposals that could advance both civilizations significantly. Zephyrian biotechnology could revolutionize human medical treatment, she explained, while our quantum processing capabilities would enhance their navigation systems exponentially. The implications extended far beyond the two primary empires. Smaller worlds watched the negotiations with intense interest, recognizing that the new alliance would reshape the entire galactic political structure. "The Andromedan Confederacy has requested observer status," Ambassador Chen reported. "They want to understand how this marriage alliance model might apply to their own territorial disputes." Victoria's smile was slight but satisfied. One precedent often becomes many. "Perhaps we're establishing a new form of interstellar diplomacy." The formal negotiations continued through the evening as both sides worked to transform military standoff into cooperative framework. Treaties this comprehensive normally required years to develop, but the unique circumstances created urgency that drove rapid progress. Kane's evening briefing confirmed what the palace staff had hoped to see. Media response across our territories is overwhelmingly positive. The marriage is being portrayed as visionary leadership rather than desperate gamble. Axel's own intelligence sources provided similar feedback from Zephyrian space. "My people are curious about humanity in ways they never were during active hostilities. Your queen has made us interesting to ourselves." As the royal couple prepared for their second night as a married pair, the practical implications of their union were becoming clear. What had begun as a strategic maneuver was evolving into a genuine partnership with applications far beyond their original intentions. Victoria reviewed the day's progress with satisfaction. "The negotiations are proceeding faster than our most optimistic projections." "Because both sides want this to succeed," Axel observed. "Fear is a powerful motivator, but hope is more powerful still." Their evening conversation covered topics ranging from military strategy to cultural differences, each finding the other's perspectives valuable in ways they hadn't anticipated. The political marriage was developing intellectual intimacy that might eventually become something deeper. Kane's final security sweep revealed the profound changes a single bold decision had created. Former enemy fleets were coordinating patrol schedules, diplomatic communications filled channels that had previously carried threats, and throughout human space, people were beginning to imagine futures that didn't center on endless warfare. The third day brought verification of the marriage's most profound implications as formal treaties were signed between the human crown and the Zephyrian Empire. The ancient laws of conquest that Victoria had invoked were now serving to create the galaxy's most comprehensive peace agreement. Victoria stood before the assembled diplomats with Axel beside her, both wearing ceremonial attire that blended their respective traditions. The signing ceremony would be broadcast across both empires and beyond, marking the official transformation of marriage gamble into political reality. "The Treaty of Unified Purpose," she announced, using the formal name they'd agreed upon, "establishes not merely peace between our peoples, but active cooperation in defense, exploration, and advancement of civilized values throughout known space. This agreement binds our fleets, our scientists, our merchants, and our peoples in common cause. Let none doubt the strength of alliance built on mutual respect and shared vision." The signing itself required complex protocols to satisfy both legal traditions. Human ceremony demanded physical signatures and official seals, while Zephyrian custom required biometric authentication and vocal commitment witnessed by 3 generations of leadership. Kane observed the proceedings with professional satisfaction and personal amazement. The Queen's instinctive gamble in claiming a prisoner of war had somehow transformed into the most successful diplomatic initiative in human history. Ambassador Chen presented the treaty's scope to the broader assembly. These agreements cover territorial boundaries, trade regulations, joint defense protocols, scientific collaboration frameworks, and cultural exchange programs across 47 star systems. The economic implications alone were staggering. Zephyrian crystal technology would revolutionize human computing capabilities, while human agricultural techniques could eliminate food scarcity across numerous Zephyrian worlds. The joint defense provisions are particularly significant, reported Admiral Foster. Combined fleet exercises will begin next month, with integrated command structures operational within 6 months. Victoria noted the broader implications as she reviewed the final documents. We're not just preventing war between two empires, we're creating an alliance that could bring stability to this entire galaxy region. The afternoon brought the first concrete implementation of treaty provisions as scientists from both sides began collaborative sessions via quantum communication links. Dr. Morgan's medical team was already receiving biological compatibility data that would ensure the royal marriage could eventually produce heirs if desired. Kane's security briefings reflected the positive response throughout human territories. Colony worlds are reporting increased optimism and decreased military recruitment requests. People are beginning to plan for peaceful futures. Similar reports emerged from Zephyrian space, where Axel's marriage was being interpreted as both honor and strategic brilliance. The combination of personal respect and political necessity had created unprecedented unity among formerly fractious noble houses. My fleet commanders are requesting permission to visit human installations, Axel reported during the evening briefing. They want to understand their new allies better. The cultural exchange programs were already showing promise. Human students were applying for Zephyrian education opportunities, while young Zephyrians expressed interest in human arts and entertainment. The marriage ceremony is being studied across multiple worlds as a model for alliance building. Ambassador Chen noted with some amusement, "You may have accidentally created a new diplomatic methodology." Victoria's response was characteristically pragmatic. If this approach can prevent other conflicts, then our personal sacrifice serves a greater purpose. As the day concluded, both spouses found themselves genuinely enjoying their evening conversations. The intellectual compatibility that had emerged during negotiations was developing into something approaching friendship. I find myself forgetting this began as a political necessity, Axel admitted. Your mind is as formidable as your reputation suggested. Victoria's smile was more genuine than diplomatic. The feeling is mutual. I expected to tolerate this marriage for strategic reasons. I'm beginning to appreciate it for personal ones. Kane's final sweep confirmed that the palace had successfully adapted to its new reality. Security protocols now included Zephyrian protection details, communication systems accommodated multiple species, and staff members were learning to navigate unprecedented cultural complexity. The marriage had required sacrifice from both participants, but its success was creating opportunities neither had imagined when Victoria made her desperate gamble in the throne room. What began as claiming a spoil of war had become the foundation for an entirely new age of interstellar cooperation. The fourth day of the royal marriage brought the first test of the new alliance's practical effectiveness. Emergency communications from the frontier colonies reported Andromedan raiders attacking settlements along the disputed border, the same raiders who had been emboldened by human-Zephyrian conflict. Victoria received the crisis reports in the Joint Command Center that had been hastily established to coordinate the new alliance's military capabilities. Kane stood at her shoulder as tactical displays showed the enemy incursion developing across 3 star systems. 27 ships, Admiral Morrison reported grimly. They're hitting supply convoys and orbital stations. Our nearest patrol group is 18 hours away. Axel studied the enemy formations with professional interest. Andromedans move in traditional pack tactics. They expect human forces to respond defensively while scrambling for reinforcement. What they don't expect, Victoria said quietly, is a coordinated response from 2 fleets. The test of their marriage's strategic value was beginning barely a week after the ceremony. Kane watched as the royal couple moved into seamless coordination, their different tactical perspectives complementing rather than conflicting. My battle group can reach the Arcturus system in 6 hours, Axel confirmed after consulting with his fleet commanders. If we coordinate with your defensive positions, Victoria was already working the tactical mathematics. A pincer movement. They'll be caught between our forces with nowhere to retreat. The joint operation required unprecedented cooperation between militaries that had been enemies until recently. Communication protocols were improvised in real time as human and Zephyrian commanders worked to coordinate their very different fighting styles. Kane monitored the operational planning with fascination. The marriage was proving its value not just diplomatically, but in practical military terms. Combined tactics were emerging that neither side could have developed independently. The Andromedan formation is designed to exploit the gaps in single-species defense patterns, reported the tactical analysis team. They've never faced integrated human-Zephyrian strategy. Admiral Vex's holographic image appeared in the command center as final preparations were completed. Warlord, our forces are in position. The humans proved surprisingly competent in operational coordination. Victoria's slight smile acknowledged the backhanded compliment. Admiral, your people's speed and precision exceed our intelligence estimates. This partnership offers advantages we hadn't fully calculated. The actual engagement unfolded with mechanical precision as the combined fleets moved against their common enemy. Human long-range capabilities provided covering fire while Zephyrian speed closed the tactical distance faster than the Andromedans could adapt. Kane tracked the battle's progress through multiple feeds, noting how naturally the two fleets complemented each other's capabilities. What had begun as marriage of political convenience was revealing genuine military synergy. Enemy formation is breaking, reported the communications officer. They're attempting to scatter, but our ships are maintaining coverage of all escape routes. Within 4 hours, the Andromedan raiders were either captured or in full retreat. The victory was decisive. But more importantly, it demonstrated the practical effectiveness of the marriage alliance in terms that every military commander in the galaxy could understand. Casualties minimal on both sides, Admiral Morrison announced. Combined fleet operations proved remarkably effective. The post-battle analysis revealed something that surprised even Victoria's strategic planning teams. The marriage hadn't just prevented war between two empires, it had created a military partnership capable of projecting power in ways that maintained regional stability. The Andromedans weren't just raiding, Axel observed as intelligence reports came in. They were testing our response to see if the alliance was genuine or merely ceremonial. Victoria nodded grimly. Now they have their answer. So does everyone else who might be considering similar tests. The evening briefings confirmed that news of the joint military success was spreading rapidly across the galaxy. Potential aggressors were reassessing their strategic positions while peaceful worlds were expressing relief at the emergence of a stabilizing force. Kane reviewed the day's events with professional satisfaction. The Queen's gamble had not only prevented war, but created a partnership capable of maintaining peace through strength rather than mere negotiation. The marriage is being interpreted differently now, he reported. Not just as diplomatic innovation, but as the foundation of a new regional power structure. Victoria and Axel spent their evening reviewing the tactical lessons learned from their first joint operation. The professional collaboration was developing into genuine partnership that extended beyond political necessity. I begin to understand why your people have been so successful, Axel admitted. Your strategic thinking accommodates variables that purely military minds often overlook, while your people's directness cuts through complications that bog down traditional diplomacy, Victoria replied. Together we may be more formidable than either of us anticipated. As the fourth day concluded, Kane's security assessments reflected a palace that had successfully transformed itself into the command center for an entirely new type of interstellar alliance. The marriage had created something unprecedented in galactic politics. The fifth day brought delegations from 12 different worlds seeking to understand how the marriage alliance model might be applied to their own regional conflicts. The palace's diplomatic staff worked frantically to accommodate the unprecedented demand for audiences with the royal couple. Victoria entered the great reception hall with Axel, both wearing formal attire that had become symbolic of the new diplomatic era. The assembled representatives included species that had never before sought human guidance, drawn by the practical success of the marriage strategy. Your Majesties, Ambassador Chen announced, the delegation from the Centauri Trade Federation seeks counsel on territorial disputes with the Vegan Consortium. The dispute in question had simmered for decades over mineral rights and shipping routes. Traditional mediation had failed repeatedly, but the success of the human-Zephyrian alliance offered a potential new approach. "The challenges are different from ours," Victoria observed after reviewing their briefing materials, "but the underlying principle may apply. Are both sides willing to consider unconventional solutions?" The Centauri representative, a crystalline being whose people communicated through harmonic resonance, sang their response in frequencies that the translation systems rendered as cautious optimism. Axel's military background provided perspective on the strategic elements. Resource conflicts often mask deeper issues of respect and recognition. Perhaps what's needed is a framework that addresses both practical and symbolic concerns. The morning sessions revealed the complexity of applying marriage alliance concepts to disputes between species with radically different social structures. What worked for hierarchical societies might fail completely with collective consciousness species. Kane observed the proceedings with growing appreciation for the diplomatic revolution they were witnessing. The palace was becoming a center for innovative conflict resolution that went far beyond traditional negotiation. "The Andromedan situation has changed the entire political landscape," reported Intelligence Chief Davis. "Aggressive powers are reconsidering their options while defensive alliances are seeking stronger partnerships." The afternoon brought even more significant developments, as the Galactic Council formally recognized the marriage alliance as a legitimate governmental structure. The implications extended far beyond simple treaty recognition. "The precedent you've established," Ambassador Chen explained, "is being codified into interstellar law. Future alliance marriages will operate under legal frameworks derived from your ceremonial choices." Victoria considered the historical implications with characteristic seriousness. "We've accidentally created a new form of government." "Not accidentally," Axel corrected. "Your instinctive understanding of power dynamics led inevitably to this result. The success was predictable once the initial gamble succeeded." The evening's formal dinner included representatives from species that had requested observer status for the ongoing diplomatic innovations. Conversations blended multiple languages as beings who might never have met socially found common ground in studying the alliance model. Kane's security briefings reflected the profound changes in galactic politics that the marriage had catalyzed. Intelligence sources report decreased military recruitment across 7 different empires. The demonstration of alliance effectiveness is encouraging negotiation over conflict. Victoria and Axe's relationship continued developing beyond its political origins. Their evening conversations had evolved from strategic planning to genuine intellectual companionship, though both maintained appropriate boundaries regarding their personal involvement. "I find myself curious about your world," Victoria admitted. "The cultural briefings provide facts, but I'd like to understand the reality." "Then perhaps a state visit should be arranged," Axel suggested. "My people would benefit from meeting the human queen who proves stronger than their greatest warlord." The diplomatic implications of such a visit would be enormous, but Kane recognized the personal significance as well. The marriage was developing genuine emotional components that strengthened rather than complicated its political effectiveness. As the 5th day concluded, palace staff were already planning for expanded diplomatic facilities. The success of the marriage alliance had transformed their location into a center for galactic conflict resolution. "We'll need additional quarters for permanent diplomatic representatives," reported Palace Administrator Walsh. "At least 8 different governments want to establish formal liaison offices here." Victoria reviewed the proposals with satisfaction mixed with responsibility. Her desperate gamble to prevent war had created obligations she hadn't anticipated, but the potential for lasting peace made those obligations worthwhile. The marriage was succeeding beyond their wildest projections, but success brought its own challenges as the galaxy's attention focused increasingly on their unprecedented partnership. The 6th day marked 1 week since Victoria's startling declaration in the throne room, and the palace prepared for the formal presentation of the marriage alliance's first comprehensive policy statement. Representatives from 47 governments waited in the Great Assembly Hall for the document that would codify their revolutionary approach to interstellar relations. Victoria and Axel entered the chamber together, their presence immediately commanding attention from beings whose species spanned the known galaxy. The formal attire they wore had become recognizable symbols of diplomatic innovation across multiple star systems. "Honored delegates," Victoria began, her voice carrying through translation matrices to reach every participant in their native communication method. 1 week ago, this alliance began as a desperate attempt to prevent war between two peoples. Today we present a framework for lasting peace among many. The Alliance Charter, as the document was formally titled, represented days of intensive collaboration between legal experts, military strategists, and cultural specialists from both empires. Its provisions would transform how interstellar conflicts were addressed. Kane monitored the proceedings from his security station, noting the intense attention every word received. Intelligence sources had confirmed that the document's contents would be analyzed by governmental experts across the galaxy within hours of its release. The Charter establishes 3 fundamental principles, Axel announced. First, that alliance through formal union can replace conquest as a method of resolving territorial disputes. Second, that combined strength serves peace better than individual power serves domination. Third, that cultural differences strengthen rather than threaten cooperative frameworks. Ambassador Chen presented the specific mechanisms by which these principles would be implemented: dispute resolution procedures, alliance formation protocols, and enforcement standards filled hundreds of pages of legal text. The marriage alliance model requires mutual respect, shared sacrifice, and committed leadership, he explained. Nations seeking to apply these methods must demonstrate genuine willingness to transform their relationship with former adversaries. The morning session focused on the economic implications of alliance partnerships. Trade benefits, resource-sharing arrangements, and joint development projects could provide incentives for peace that exceeded the potential gains from military conflict. Combined Zephyrian and human economic output has increased 17% in just 1 week, reported Economics Minister Patterson. Alliance partnerships create synergies that pure competition cannot achieve. Victoria noted the broader implications as she reviewed real-time data from both empires. We're not just preventing conflicts. We're demonstrating that cooperation produces better results than domination. The afternoon sessions addressed military coordination protocols that allowed former enemies to serve common defensive purposes without sacrificing their individual identity or strategic capabilities. Admiral Morrison presented the joint fleet exercises that had proven so effective against the Andromedan raiders. Combined tactical doctrines enable responses to threats that neither force could handle independently. Axel's military perspective added crucial details about command structure integration. Success requires trust at the operational level. Our officers must respect each other's capabilities and trust each other's judgment under pressure. Kane watched the military discussions with professional interest. The Alliance was creating new strategic realities that would influence galactic security for generations to come. The defensive capabilities of marriage alliances could stabilize entire regions, observed General Hayes via secure communication from Frontier Command. Aggressive powers can't compete with coordinated defensive responses. The evening plenary session brought together all the day's discussions and a comprehensive presentation that outlined the marriage alliance model's broader applications. The assembled delegates recognized they were witnessing the emergence of a new era in interstellar relations. The charter will be transmitted to every government in known space, Ambassador Chen announced. Those interested in exploring alliance partnerships may request formal consultation through established diplomatic channels. Victoria's closing statement emphasized the personal commitment that successful alliances required. This approach demands sacrifice from leadership. Axel and I chose to bind our lives together for our people's benefit. Similar dedication will be required of others who choose this path. The formal ceremony concluded with the charter's official signing and transmission, but informal discussions continued throughout the evening as delegates sought to understand the practical implications for their own governmental situations. Kane's evening briefing confirmed the overwhelming positive response to the day's presentations. Initial reactions range from intense interest to serious consideration. At least 12 governments are discussing formal alliance exploration. Victoria and Axel's private consultation that evening revealed their shared satisfaction with the day's achievements, but also their growing awareness of the responsibilities they had undertaken. "We've created something unprecedented," Victoria observed. "The success is gratifying, but the implications are enormous." "Great achievements require great commitment," Axel replied. "Our personal sacrifice has created opportunities for galactic transformation. The investment seems worthwhile." Their relationship continued developing beyond political necessity as they discovered genuine compatibility in their approaches to leadership and responsibility. The marriage was becoming something neither had expected when Victoria made her desperate gamble in the throne room. As the sixth day concluded, Palace Communication Systems registered formal requests for alliance consultation from governments across the galaxy. The marriage that had begun as a last resort was becoming the foundation for an entirely new approach to interstellar peace. The seventh day brought the first formal application from another government seeking to implement the marriage alliance model, and with it the realization that Victoria and Axel's experiment had fundamentally altered the trajectory of galactic civilization. The delegation from the Proxima Confederacy arrived before dawn, their request carrying the urgency of a people facing extinction. Their century-long conflict with the Tau Ceti Empire had reached the point where only complete victory or total annihilation seemed possible. Traditional diplomacy had failed, military solutions were proving too costly for either side to sustain, and both populations were demanding resolution. Victoria received them in the palace's formal consultation chamber, with Axel beside her and Kane coordinating security for what had become an impromptu summit meeting. The chamber's advanced communication systems accommodated the insects-like Proximans and the aquatic Tausetians simultaneously. "Your Majesties," the Proximan Queen Mind spoke through her translation apparatus, "our species have studied your alliance model with great interest. We believe a similar approach might resolve our territorial dispute before it destroys both civilizations." The Tausetian Depth Council representative, appearing via environmental projection, added their perspective. "The conflict has consumed too many resources and too many lives. Your marriage demonstrates that former enemies can become effective partners." Kane observed the proceedings with fascination as Victoria and Axel began what amounted to the galaxy's first formal alliance counseling session. Their week of experience was being called upon to guide civilizations whose very survival might depend on the advice they received. "The model requires more than ceremony," Victoria explained carefully. "Both leadership structures must demonstrate genuine commitment to transformation, rather than mere tactical advantage." Axel's military background provided crucial perspective on the practical requirements. "Your species' conflict patterns suggest deep cultural incompatibilities. An alliance marriage would need to address those fundamental differences, not simply override them. The complexity of applying human Zephyrian solutions to insectoid aquatic disputes became apparent as the morning progressed. Cultural translation alone required expertise that hadn't existed a week earlier. The Queen Mind structure could theoretically bond with Depth Council collective consciousness, reported Dr. Kim after reviewing the biological and psychological assessments. But the psychological integration would be unprecedented. Ambassador Chen worked frantically to develop legal frameworks that could accommodate such radically different governmental systems. The success with Victoria and Axel had occurred between compatible hierarchical structures, but this application would test the model's adaptability. "The territorial disputes are actually less complex than the cultural ones," he reported. "Resource allocation can be negotiated, but consciousness compatibility requires research we've never attempted." The afternoon brought additional complications as intelligence reports confirmed that both the Proximan and Tausetian militaries were planning final offensive operations. The timeline for diplomatic solution was measured in days, not weeks. Victoria found herself in the unprecedented position of serving as marriage counselor for species she'd barely known existed a week earlier. The responsibility was staggering, but the alternative was watching civilizations destroy each other. "The core principle remains valid," she told the assembled delegates. "Leadership must demonstrate that cooperation produces better results than continued conflict. The specific mechanisms may need modification for your unique circumstances." Kane's security assessments revealed the broader implications of the consultation's success or failure. If the marriage alliance model could prevent the Proxima Tau Ceti War, its credibility as a diplomatic tool would be established across the galaxy. "At least 6 other conflicts are being monitored by governments considering similar solutions," he reported. "The precedent established here will influence those decisions." The evening brought breakthrough developments as both the Queen Mind and Depth Council agreed to formal alliance exploration. The specific marriage ceremony would require months of preparation, but the commitment to attempt cooperation was already changing the strategic calculation. "Immediate military stand-down protocols are being implemented," reported Admiral Morrison. Both sides are withdrawing to defensive positions while alliance negotiations proceed. Victoria and Axel's debriefing session revealed their shared amazement at how quickly their personal gamble had become a galactic institution. The marriage that had saved their peoples was now being positioned to save others. "We've accidentally become the galaxy's premier marriage counselors," Victoria observed with wry humor. "More accurately, we've demonstrated that personal commitment can create political transformation," Axel corrected. "The model works because it requires genuine sacrifice for genuine benefit." Kane's final assessment of the day confirmed the historical significance of what had occurred. The palace had hosted its first successful application of the marriage alliance model to a foreign conflict, and the results appeared to validate their approach. As the seventh day concluded, Victoria and Axel stood together on the palace's observation deck, looking out at the stars that now held dozens of worlds, studying their example. The marriage that had begun in desperation had become the foundation for a new age of interstellar cooperation. "A week ago, I thought I was preventing a war," Victoria said quietly. "Now it appears we've invented a new form of civilization. The best strategies often produce results beyond their original intentions," Axel replied. "Perhaps we've created something more important than either of us could have achieved alone." Their relationship had evolved from political necessity to genuine partnership, and their marriage had become the cornerstone of galactic transformation. The experiment that began with Victoria's desperate claim in the throne room was reshaping the future of interstellar relations. Palace Communications registered 17 new requests for alliance consultation, while intelligence sources confirmed that aggressive conflicts across 3 sectors were being reconsidered in light of the marriage alliance model's demonstrated effectiveness. The human queen's gamble had not only saved 2 empires from mutual destruction, it had shown the galaxy a path toward lasting peace through strength, wisdom, and the courage to choose cooperation over conquest.